Here, I would like to introduce you to, some of you might be familiar with it, but to introduce you to a concept of data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. So it's a journey of making use of data to the highest point, which is your wisdom, which is trying to predict things in the future and prevent issues from happening. So that's the journey. Now, if you sort of start to see data and information, which I will explain in detail further, as a way to look back at our past, as in what happened earlier. Like, for example, if that bridge failed in Chennai during floods, we have to look back at our data and say, how did that failure happen? What caused those failures? What were the reasons? What were the contributing factors? And then the knowledge and wisdom element of it comes into picture to say that, okay, can I predict what will happen later if such a flood happens in the future? When is that flood going to happen? You know, those kind of informations. So it's kind of like a pyramid, as you would say, see, and as you go up the pyramid, so from the data, then you transfer it to information, etc., you are adding more value to your initial data. And the questions, as again, as I mentioned, the more you answer, the higher you go up your pyramid. So it's not about just collecting data, but making sense of that data to inform decisions. And most of the time, there is one goal that we want to achieve. So you might have these pyramids for multiple goals. And what do I mean by that? Goals are, for example, if I have to say I want to make all my railways or roads resilient to climate change, so that's my goal. Or let's say, okay, I want to stop it from failing for the next 15 years or 20 years. That's my goal. I want to reduce carbon or environmental emissions from transportation for the next 20 years. That's again my goal. So for each of these different goals, you will have a different pyramid and the way that you approach it. So that's what we're trying to sort of talk today, and then give you some examples on how that has been done in real life. So just to go into detail of those things, data, as you all know, raw data, we collect it in different forms. It will be a sort of like a sack of huge amount of information, but without context, there is no point of getting those data. And what do I mean by that is, for example, if you have in your Excel file or your data collected a random number which says 12/01/2020, it's just a sequence of numbers, as you can see. Anyone who looks at it would be like, okay, what does this numbers mean? What is it? Is it a cost? Is it a date? What is it? So if you say that, it's in a very simple form, right? So if you just say that, oh, this column is about date, then it tells you that, okay, there you go, it's put into context. On the 12th of January 2020, X, Y, Z things happened. So that's that simple level of raw data. Now you sort of go up the building block, which is trying to derive information from your data. And what does that mean is that it's trying to see if, are there any relationships between our data? So to give you an example, if you are looking at a relationship between extreme flooding and rainfall. So you might see that, okay, when there is higher rainfall happening, there is a higher possibility of flood happening. So that's something which is, we know by knowledge that, oh yes, if there is more rain, there is going to be more flood. But there are certain even much more complex aspects which we don't know actually exists, like, which I will say that later in the examples. But for example, how does the quality of my road impact the fuel that I burn while I drive my car? We know that there is a relation, but we don't know how much of a relation. So can we try and get that relationship, or in terms of an equation or in actual quantifiable numbers? So that's deriving information from your data. So now you are a bit up the ladder. You know that, okay, these are the things that's happening. You have that information in your hand. When you go much more higher, is that once you have got all that information, again, you have to all, depending upon the goal that we have set, saying, okay, this is my goal. This is the information I have. Can I ask more aspects of it? So that's to do with how is the information derived from the data relevant to our goals. So it's about trying to see that, okay, I know that the floods and rainfall is a pattern. What can I do to prevent those flooding from happening? Even because I can't prevent extreme rainfall, but I can prevent floods from happening. So how do I do that? Maybe better city planning, better drainages, making our sewers cleaned every year before rainfall. So there are certain operational aspects which comes to it. So you sort of go up the ladder. Now, knowledge is where usually till date a lot of places around the world do. So they don't really start to think about wisdom. And we have started to think about it in a couple of research projects as well as in application, which I will talk to you about later. But wisdom is the place to achieve. And what do I mean by that is, once you know that I have the data, I have what's the relationship between different things, I know what needs to be done, can I see what will happen in the future? So if I say that, okay, I am going to do X today, I have to understand what's the impact of my X decision in another 20 or 50 years. Or even if I have an option of X, Y, or Z decision or strategies, which is the best strategy? So that sort of comparison. And in conceptual forms, you might say that again, you might have seen these pictures earlier, but data is sort of just there. You don't know what is happening. Yeah, it's just a lot of dots in there. But then once you start to make a bit of relationship, you start to see, okay, these are two different clusters. One is blue, one's green. One is of a particular element, the other of the other. Then you start to analyze it more, and that analyzing could happen using different techniques, machine learning, artificial intelligence, the other data analytics methods. Then you start to see that, oh, the data is telling me a story, right? So there is a relationship between these things, which gives me the knowledge. And then the insight or the wisdom is then looking into it saying, okay, what is the key point which I have to focus on in the future? So that's the sort of journey you start to see.